Hi everybody, welcome back to Donovan and Shelby Read. My name is Shelby. For those of you who are subscribers, welcome back, and for those of you who are new to our channel, welcome. Me and my sister post book videos here on YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about our recent reads, so I'm super excited that y'all could join us today. Before we get this thing rolling, you might notice from this frame to the next, it's going to kind of be like spot the difference. I filmed the intro and the next part at different times. I like lost the pieces of clothing that I was wearing before, so everything just looks a little bit different. How many differences can you spot? Let me know in the comments. So I hope that you will stick around, join me and my sister as we talk about our recent reads, whether it be with coffee, tea, or a snack. So without further ado, we're going to get this video started and let's talk about our recent reads. My first book that I'm going to talk about is called The Midnight Library by Haig, and I thought it was going to be like just a super fun sort of fantasy book, sort of kind of like House on the Cerulean Sea was. I kind of thought Midnight Library would be that for me. As I was searching for a book, this book just kept popping up on books that you should read or whatever. And I had actually only heard of it recently. I hadn't really seen anybody else talk about it, which is very surprising because I didn't realize how popular it was until I decided to read it. As soon as I was finished reading it, I went and kind of saw the general public's consensus, and yeah, it was super popular. I'm glad that I didn't see that hype before I read it because I was sort of underwhelmed by it, by the hype that the first part of the book gave. I'm glad that I didn't have a bunch of the hype that other people had given it because I feel like it might have fallen even more flat. So I gave Midnight Library 3 stars. Something that I would like to talk about that I didn't know about going into it, and I guess I should, if I had done any amount of research, I might have known, but the main character, this isn't even a spoiler, this is just literally like how the book starts off. It's the whole point of the book. She has made the decision to commit suicide, and so the entire rest of the book is what happens next, like after she has made the decision. And I guess I just wasn't expecting that because I hadn't really looked up the book. I forget what the synopsis was, but it was like, at the end of your life there's a library and it's full of all of these amazing books and it's all of the lives you could have lived, or something along that line, and that just sounded so magical to me. I was so excited. I thought I was gonna be just totally like transported into this like fantasy world with this library, and like what would the librarian be like? What's this concept gonna be? Actually, when I was reading this book, I was in a very stressed point of my life. Yeah, it was just really difficult. I felt like I was missing the mark in so many different ways. And the main character, I can go ahead and finally get into the synopsis of what this book is about. We're faced with a main character who feels the same way. I think she's either in her early to mid to late, she's a 30-something. I cannot remember at this very moment, but she feels like she's missed the mark. She feels like she's just done life wrong, and she has so many regrets. So many regrets. The things she could have done, the person that she could have been, she feels like she missed the mark. That's kind of where I was at that point where I was reading this book. So just a heads up for those of you who might not be in a good headspace to just constantly kind of be reading about somebody's suicidal ideations, then it might not be the best book for you to read at that point in your life. I've read reviews now that I've finished the book, and some people just absolutely, it was like life-changing for them. Amazing. 5 stars across the board. For me, I don't know. I just wasn't too pleased. So we're following Nora. We're meeting her in present time, and like I said, she's the main character who is just having last straw after last straw after last straw, and she is like, I'm done with this. She can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you know? She can't see that it would ever get better, and so she decides to take her own life. And the night she makes that decision, she awakens to a library, and it is a library filled with books, and thousands, millions, and actually infinite number of books. And each of those books is a life that she could have lived by making an infinite number of choices at any moment in her life. So how does a library work? How do you choose what your next book is going to be? It's all in the Book of Regrets. So Nora, she is able to pinpoint exact regrets she made in her life, say, what if I didn't do this? And she could go to the book and live that life. The main chunk of it was Nora living these lives that she could have lived, and I didn't really like it. I felt like it was kind of boring, really sad. I think some people thought that the book lacked depth, and while I sort of agree, I think it kind of went as deep as it wanted to. It kind of made the points it wanted to. It made them very clearly. I think the biggest letdown for me is that I really thought it was going to be one of those warm, cozy, feel-good books, like curl up with tea and a candle on and just really enjoy it. I had so much anxiety reading the book. It just kind of was depressing and kind of boring as well until the very end, when it's like it's like the protagonist has this amazing discovery and this revelation, and by then I was just kind of like, I'm bored and I'm sad, and I've known what you were gonna say to me since the book started, so I just wasn't the biggest fan. But if you enjoyed this book, I totally get it. It could have been like half just the headspace that I was in when I read it, and kind of what I was expecting. I was expecting something different, and it just wasn't what I was expecting, and maybe I shouldn't hold that against the book, so that's why I gave it 3 stars, because it wasn't great. In fact, the writing didn't really like wow me, but yeah, it was great, quick little fun read. Actually, not even, I wouldn't even necessarily say fun. It was a great quick little read, and I'm glad that I read it, so now I have an opinion on it. The next book that I read was Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. Wow. This book was total 5-star across the board. I would recommend this book to anybody. I loved it so much. I even recommended it to Donica, and I think she'll like it, but I would recommend this book to anybody. It was so amazing. I actually laughed out loud a few times. I wasn't like bending over, like guffawing, but I chuckled a few times, and I feel like when you're reading and you can actually chuckle, like, it was pretty funny. In Anxious People, we start off the book with a bank robbery. So somebody robs a bank. The bank robbery goes wrong, and it leads to a hostage situation, and the rest of the book is trying to figure out, where did the bank robbery go? Who done it? Who held them hostage? Who robbed the bank? And while we're trying to figure all of that out, this book is told through like the police investigation interviews and actual real-time dialogue with the hostages and like what was happening in those situations, and it's told from various sort of viewpoints of the characters in the story. It is one of those, like, it gives you a million different pieces, and then at the very end they all come together. The characters are so good. Some people thought they were really, really obnoxious, but half of that is kind of the circumstance, and the other half is just this author. I think he finds the hilarity and just the beauty of totally wacky situations that it's like, never would a person be like this, and sometimes people actually are like this. I just couldn't stop thinking, how many lives did this author live to have so many good points? Like, he made point after point after point. He doesn't shy away from talking about the things that really, really hurt. Just about living, he doesn't shy away from those things. He's so honest, but also manages to keep it light and relatable, and he treats the characters so kindly, even when they are so annoying. And when he treats them kindly, it makes you want to treat them kindly as well as a reader. I like the mystery aspect of it, like the kind of like whodunit, kind of trying to figure out what happened in this hostage situation. It was so fun. I feel like the mystery wasn't done, the police investigation wasn't done just to like randomly throw something in there. I feel like it pushed the story along and it made sense, and the more you figured out about what was going on, the more you figured out about the characters, the more you figured out about yourself. That's all I have to say about Anxious People. Amazing. So the next book is called The Last Story of Mina Lee by Jooyoun Kim. And I put this book on hold on Libby because I was about to get it when I was at Half Price Books, but the book was still a little bit expensive, so I put it back on the shelf. So I decided to check it out from Libby so that I could still read the book. So The Last Story of Mina Lee, we're essentially following, it's kind of like a dual timeline sort of story. We're following a daughter in 2014 called Margot, and then her mom, Mina Lee, and we're following her timeline, which is in 1987, I believe, 1980s. Margot's mom is a Korean immigrant. She fled from North Korea to South Korea, and then she came to the United States. We get to hear sort of about Mina's life through Margot. I don't know how much to give away. There's sort of kind of, I didn't really see it in the synopsis, and there's like a sort of spoiler at the very, very beginning of the book, but I don't know if some people expect it. It happens within like the first probably like 30 pages, but I won't reveal it just in case. I don't know how much this is actually revealed online. So Margot spends this book kind of understanding and reconciling her feelings that she's had to her mom throughout her life, and all of this dealing with the fact that her mom it was very hard to relate to her because it was difficult for her to learn the English language, so she spoke very little English, and then Margot spoke very little Korean, and so the two just totally misunderstood each other, like essentially their whole life. There was just this lack of connection, this lack of bond, and a lot of that was, through the lens of the fact that Margot's mom had been through so much. The experience as a Korean American immigrant, there are so many traumas and there are so many stories behind that. So we get to hear all of that. We get to hear Mina's truly tragic story and her story of perseverance for her entire life through this. I gave the book 3 stars, however, just because I just felt this flat, sort of boring, just dryness throughout the book. There were so many emotions that could have been felt. I didn't really gather the emotions from the pages. It was almost like the emotions that hit me were kind of just the hardest things, just the fact that the circumstances were so sad, but not necessarily because I truly felt like the characters were going through these things. So I feel like Mina was a stronger character and Margot was definitely a weaker character. I might have done a 2, but I just kind of bumped it up to a 3 because I hadn't read anything like this yet, so it was nice to get that perspective. The last book that I'm going to talk about today is called Quiet in Her Bones by Nalini Singh. So this is one of the books that was on my anticipated list for 2021 because it just sounded like a cool concept. We are following the main character, Arav Rai. He is from a very, very wealthy family. They lived in a super affluent area of New Zealand. One day, Arav's mom goes missing, along with, I believe, $500,000. And everybody thought she ran off to go live her best life off somewhere and just spend all the money and just disappear and leave forever without saying goodbye to her family. Years in the future, her body is found in a car in this like thick New Zealand brush right by the cul-de-sac. The last thing she was seen wearing before she disappeared, she was wearing in the car, so she actually had never left. So the entire book is Arav, her son, essentially trying to figure out what happened to her. He also, in the more recent timeline, had gotten in a car accident, and so he's on a bunch of different medications, so he becomes like an increasingly unreliable narrator, but he's trying to get to the bottom of his mother's death and figure out what really happened because he just does not believe that it was an accident. And of course, we're in an affluent little cul-de-sac area, so there's tons of neighbor drama. Oh my gosh, the characters were really, really good. We got very little snippets of every character, but what we did get, I feel like it really fleshed them out awesomely. The atmosphere in this book was absolutely amazing. I truly felt like I was in this cozy, really clean, manicured setting that is also kind of creepy because everybody has dirt on everybody. Multiple people could have killed Arav's mom, could have had a reason to kill her or a reason to aid in the murder of her. So that's really juicy. I really wish there was more. I wish there was more of just that sort of like, I think the way there could have been more is that there weren't so many characters. There's so many characters in this book. Got pretty difficult to keep track of. I literally sometimes had no clue who they were talking about. I was like, I don't know who this is. I'm just gonna go along with it until I figure it out. You have to really pay attention from the beginning to these characters, but the cast was huge. I cannot decide on a star rating for this book. It was much more thrilling and much more interesting and a better read than my other 3 stars that I've had in this recent reads. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4, but it's not right up there with my 5s. In fact, I'd probably give it a 3.5, bump it up to a 4. It was really fun to talk about these books with y'all. I hope that if you've read any of them, you can let me know what you thought, especially I think Midnight Library and Anxious People. Maybe some of y'all have read those because I know that those are like the very popular books that I read. I started off this reading cycle with a bang. So let me know what y'all thought. I'd love to hear from people who really love the Midnight Library because I just love to hear opinions different than mine. I hope that all of y'all are doing well. Thanks for sticking around. Hope y'all enjoyed. I'll talk to y'all later.
Doing a little bang part, trying to give trying to give Severus Snape. I've been marathoning the Harry Potter movies, so I'm trying to give Snape, Severus Snape. Hi y'all! So as always, thank you Shelby. I'm sure her books were incredible. Per usual, Shelby never misses with her books. Now here on this half, if y'all know me, if you're new, welcome. I'm Donica. If you are not, you know we're talking about assassins, we're talking about ghosts, fantastic beasts and where to find them. So let's go ahead and get into it. I am a little backlogged on books. Obviously, I don't want to talk about 30 books in this one video. So in next month's July wrap up, I'll be completely caught up with every book, you know, some that I'm not mentioning that I have read in this video. So the first two books were book talks. The last two book talks we've done. The Lost Village by Camilla Sten, I gave that like about a 3.75. And then Finlay, Donovan is Killing It by Elle, Cosimano, and I gave that book a solid 4. The Lost Village was like touted as the Blair Witch Project meets Midsummer. So the Midsummer I can totally see because of the vibes. It's like a little mining village. Everyone went missing in it, you know, years ago, and it's set in Sweden. So like the vibes were all there for that. Now the Blair Witch Project, I feel like it almost did itself a disservice by claiming to be like this documentary style, because the main character is making a documentary about all these people that went missing. But really outside of why they were there, the documentary is kind of set to the wayside. So if you go into this, no, it's like a kind of creepy B horror, like what's going on at this little town. It's secluded, so all of our main characters, you know, there's no way out. That's really easy. I really liked it. If you have not read it, why don't you put it on your October, Spooktober TBR? But definitely don't go into it thinking it's like gonna be found footage or heavily documented. It's really not, but like I said, it was a good book. Finlay, Donovan is Killing It. This is about a struggling single mother, you know, just trying to get by. She writes crime mystery books. She gets mistaken for a hitman, and which is incredible. But you know, with being a hitman comes a lot of money that she really needs. She's like in this moral dilemma, like what the heck, like do I want to be a hitman, you know? The pay is good. Really interesting premise. I liked that. But it is, I feel like you have to go into this knowing that it's so unbelievable. The way, it's almost fantastical. It's almost set in a fantasy world with how she gets out of situations or how things play out. It's just so coincidental. So if you go into it knowing that it's kind of these silly situations, I liked it. I thought it was not funny, like I wasn't laughing, but I was definitely like, this is the most crazy situation. It would never happen in real life. Just everything lined up so perfectly for Finlay. On to the next books I read. These are actually rereads for me. Sarah J. Maas, if you don't know, she is my queen. Where I started with her was the Throne of Glass series. I mean, this was her first series published, and I found her as these were published, 2012. Basically, what we're following our main character, Selena Sardothian. She's an assassin. Now, in The Assassin's Blade, these are the prequel novellas. Although there's different ways people suggest to read the prequels, like I think they say After Heir of Fire. I read these because they were initially released as ebooks. This was published in 2012, like August, and the ebooks were published back to back, say like in May, June, July. I read the ebooks first. I suggest reading them first because you do get a really big look at how Selena is before she's broken, what breaks her. And although a couple of things are mentioned from the prequel in The Throne of Glass, there are a few things mentioned in here. Nothing that would like confuse you. You would probably just kind of like just graze over them and be like, whatever, I don't know what this means. Something huge happens here that Selena is kind of not acknowledging in this book. I don't even know if she acknowledges it in the second book. So you know what's going on, but it's not addressed for a while. I think that's why people want to save it like as a shock later on. Or that probably doesn't make sense, obviously, if you've not read the novellas, but I say read them first. I think that's a good look at her before this. So in Throne of Glass, Selena, this awesome main character. You know, she's like a top assassin despite being a young female. She's like the lead assassin of her master Arabin Hamel's like guild. And when we find her in this book, she had been sent to a salt mine, a prisoner salt mine, and people don't make it out of there. They don't make it out of Indovier. I don't know how to say these words, but they don't make it out of that salt mine. But she's given the chance because the prince comes to her and says, hey, I want you to compete for me in this competition, and you're competing to be the king's assassin. Just knowing how it continues, because I stopped at like the 4th book, I almost wish I could just skip the first 2 and go right into the 3rd and continue on, because all this is good. Like, I gave these 5 stars. I love her. I will only give her 5 stars. I just feel like she has really grown as an author, and this was all I knew when I read her, and I loved it. But for like a first book, I feel like this is probably one of her weaker ones, in my opinion. In preparation for Riley Sager's latest book, because I started reading Riley Sager last year, I can't remember around what time, but Home Before Dark, I was introduced to him, I think from Shelby. His newest one, Survive the Night, is coming out on Tuesday. I'm currently filming this on Sunday. You'll see this after that book is released, but it's coming to me like day of. So I'm gonna get into that ASAP. Lock Every Door and Final Girl. So I have the Book of the Month editions of all of them, well, except for one. But unfortunately, Survive the Night was not a Book of the Month edition yet. I'm still hopeful. I really don't know how Book of the Month works, but I'm really hopeful it's added so I can have a full like collection. So after reading all of his books, I finally realized, and I talked about this in my Riley Sager video I did, but my problem with his books is like pacing. I feel like they're kind of they're medium paced books, but almost to like the slower end, like slow to medium. And the pacing is like not a lot happens, and then, you know, the ending is good and the twists are amazing. But I feel like he's getting better. As he's writing, his pacing is getting better. Another thing I had a problem with is his characters. I don't like them per se. And I feel like in these books, you need to root for the character, right? That's really what gets you on the edge of your seat, because you're like rooting for this character. You're like, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen next? And I have a problem with just connecting with his characters. But with Lock Every Door, we're following our main character, Jules. She's in this creepy hotel. She gets this really great job opportunity to work in there, but nefarious things start happening, and she's trying to figure out what is going on with this hotel, what's going on with its residents. Like, I need to figure out what's happening here. I gave this one 5 stars because I like his books, and if I like his main character, which I did feel like Jules was the only one out of all of its books I've read that I was like, I can root for her. I don't think she was bratty or rude or anything. She was just kind of like this normal woman who had like a pretty sad backstory, and I liked it. Final Girls, I read this one last, and this is the first one he ever published, and this is like his slasher of all of the books, and I love slashers. Favorite hands down genre movie ever. So I was really looking forward to this one because I was like, oh, this is going to be my favorite. Well, unfortunately, it was my least favorite. I gave this a 3. Once again, the main character, Quincy, didn't really care about her. The pacing, I feel like, was the slowest in this one of all of them. Between this one and The Last Time I Lied, those were like my 2 least favorite books. But like I said, as he wrote books, as he's written them, they've gotten like better with pacing. So I'm super excited because I feel like Survive the Night is going to be the make it or break it for me. I have been watching interviews Riley Sager has done. He's just a cool, normal dude, so I'm really rooting for him. I know this book is going to just kill because so many people kill. No pun intended. Final Girls, it's about a final girl, someone that survived a brutal attack, and a lot of people died except for the final girl. So I was really looking for more slasher action, but really it wasn't that. It was more of like this mystery of final girls dying, and our main character has to figure out why, and is she next. The most interesting part of the book is he usually does like flashbacks or things like that, and the flashback to the night of what happened was so, I wish the whole book would have just been like that. It was so interesting, and that's where maybe for just a couple of pages towards the end of the book you get like the slash fest, and oh, I live for it. But there wasn't much of that in the book, so that's why I gave that 3 stars. So the next book I read was a fantasy, would I call it urban Yeah, probably urban fantasy, because this is like set in the real world, but there are vampires and fairies and stuff like that. It's called Rhapsodic by Thalassa. Our main character, Calypso, is a siren. And why I read this is because I've seen, well, first of all, it was on Kindle Unlimited, so I was able to just like rent it for free. But I see so many people saying, if you like A Court of Thorns and Roses, if you like From Blood and Ash, read this book. And those are two books that I really love. One being my all-time favorite, and then From Blood and Ash being like this really intricate storyline. I understand why this is recommended, but I feel like in terms of story and world building, this just isn't there. I gave it a solid 4 because I thought it was fun. You'll notice that I don't rate books really on like writing or this and that. It's mostly on, is it an enjoyable read? Like, do I think you'll enjoy reading it? Yeah, if you're not super picky about certain things. Because I just read to like get away and get lost in the story. If it can do that, then I'm happy. It definitely had its problems with, like I said, the story, the world building, morally gray areas. I don't think I'll continue on with the series. I just don't think I was interested enough in what's going to happen next. And I did pick up the second book. I tried to read it like back to back, which I generally don't do that, but I was just like, let me just see what's going to happen. And I just noticed that the second book is kind of like copy and paste what was going on in the first one. And I was just like, you know what? I think I've had enough of this. Essentially, Calypso, when she's younger, something happens and she has to call upon this man called the Bargainer, who is able to fix your problems but for a price. So if you call on him, now you owe him a favor, and he can call that favor in whenever he wants to. Well, Calypso falls for him and begins calling him over and over and over, and ends up owing him hundreds of favors. Now at this time, Calypso is like 16. The Bargainer is like super old and ancient. He's a fae, so most of these fae are like ancient. So why couldn't you just make her 18? I think just make her legal, you know, like, especially because this fae is like a ancient grandpa, you know, and they use, oh, she's a siren, so age, it works different for sirens. Just make her 18. I'm a fan of that forbidden love. It's my favorite thing. A little toxic masculinity, I'm always a fan of that, just a little bit. I'm sorry, it's my guilty pleasure. It was a decent 4. The next book I read was called The Nothing Man by Catherine Ryan Howard, and I gave this one a 4-star. This one was so interesting, and I always go into my books not really knowing much. Read the little synopsis. If it sounds good, let's see what's happening. And then after the fact, I'll look at reviews or different things like that. When I saw the synopsis, it just said, I was the girl who survived the Nothing Man. Now I am the woman who's going to catch him. Essentially, our main character, Eve Black, has written a book called The Nothing Man, and it's about her search to find the killer who murdered her family along with many other people and ruined many other families. Then it says supermarket security guard Jim Doyle is reading the book too. With each turn of the page, his rage grows because Jim was and is the Nothing Man. So I was like, wait, I'm gonna be able to see from his perspective too how he feels about what's going on. Like, you know from the get-go who the murderer is. Like, that's so interesting. Well, what I didn't realize was the Nothing Man, it's written like the actual book by Eve Black. I mean, essentially you have in your hand, it's not even like a book within a book, it's the book, the fictional book, The Nothing Man. That's what you're reading. And you're reading it, it's just a true crime memoir, basically. All of his killings from his first killing to Eve Black's family, you're reading this book like it's a true crime memoir, which I don't read those. I find those kind of boring to me, and I did think, oh, if I had purchased the audiobook of this, I bet I would have liked it more, because it's essentially like almost like a true crime podcast I'd be listening to. Although this is none of this is real, but you're reading it like it is. It's just such an interesting concept and way to like write a book. Interspersed between this book you're reading is little snippets of Jim, who's reading the book. The parts you're reading is really him reading it, and then you'll get a little break and it's him and his little commentary or what's going on in his life, where he's like a failed supermarket guard. His marriage is, you know, rocky, and he's a mess. I do suggest it, especially if you love reading true crime, just to have like this. It's just super cool. I definitely recommend y'all looking into that. I'm rounding out my part with just all the middle grade that I've read over the last couple of months. The first 2 5-star. I cannot rave enough about the Moendale mystery series. I read the first one in March, 3 Times Lucky. Incredible. Southern, sassy main character. I love Mo. I love Dale. This one has a ghost. Incredible. 5 stars. This one is an incredible fantasy, middle grade fantasy called Wilderlore, The Accidental Apprentice. I read this one, I believe, in April as my mid-month middle grade, and this was 500 stars. This one, I feel like could almost get to like a Harry Potter status, and I know that's saying a lot. I guess it's because I love the concept so much of like this boy who has to break out of his little comfort zone where he's living in this town where everyone just wants to be safe and have rules, and they tell you don't go into the woods because there are wild animals and these people called lore keepers that like love these wild animals. So that's not good, that's bad. Accidentally goes into the woods and accidentally bonds with a beast. And when you bond with these beasts, which have all kinds of different tiers, basically, like almost like Pokemon-ish, like a rare Pokemon or calm, you know, when you bond, they go onto your skin like a tattoo, and you can call them out like a Pokeball almost. So I love Pokemon, so I think that's another reason why I'm such a fan of this series. I just feel like if she really goes there, keeps up with the writing, and just goes all in, and I need more. Amanda Foody, I think I mentioned this, I need more. I need bigger books. Keep going, right? Just all the pages. I need all the pages because these characters are great. I mean, just so good. The next one I read was The Midnight Howl, and this is by Benjamin Reed and Laura Trinder. The Midnight Hour, the first book, was my top middle grade of last year, 5 stars. I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed its predecessor. So good. This one was pretty good as well. Same characters, same humor. The villain that we're facing in like this, the first book, the second book, the third book, which I think will be the final book, it's all the same villain. The Midnight Hour is this realm where all these magical creatures live, and I think there are so many opportunities to have really cool different villains and problems for our main characters to solve. So I do wish we had another villain to face, but still super good, and I will definitely continue on. Next book was 13 Witches by Jodi Lynn Anderson. I found her through her book she wrote many years ago called Maybird, the Maybird series, and I mistakenly said that I don't think she had written for a while after that series, but she has. She definitely has been steady writing, but this is her newest book. It just released this year. I gave this a 5-star. It made me shed a tear. It was so good and so touching. We have our main character, Rosie. Essentially what happens is she's just like living her life pretty ordinary, aside from her mother being very disconnected from her, not really showing any love, affection to her at all. She is thrown into this world of magic, and she realizes that she comes from a line of witch hunters, and there are these 13 really evil witches that all they want is for the world to burn, essentially. And one of them, the memory thief, actually is responsible for stealing her mother's memories. So that's why her mother really does not care about Rosie, because she has really no recollection of who Rosie is, and she kind of lives in this haze of not remembering. It was a good book. I suggest it. Now, the last books I read were graphic novels, and this is the 5 Worlds series. I've talked about this before. I reread the first one and I moved on to the second one. Amazing graphic novels, y'all. If you're into middle grade or not, I just think these are really fun graphic novels. If you are kind of like in a book slump, you just want something easy to get you out of it, maybe this will help, because I think first of all, the illustrations are beautiful. The story is awesome for, like I said, being middle grade to young adult. It's just an incredible story. They are still coming out. I think there's 4 out currently. The 5th one comes out later this year. I would suggest you don't look ahead to the covers because I was spoiled. I have 3 of them, and I was spoiled by the 3rd cover, like super bad, like 2 major things. I would just suggest buy them one at a time, read them, then go on to the next one. But I have the Sand Warrior and the Cobalt Prince. Just to quickly run them down, there are 5 worlds that were created by gods, and beacons come off of all of these worlds, just shining into the sky, and everyone was at peace and happy. But of course, a little evil snuck in, trying to take over. The gods were able to vanquish the evil entity, but one of the gods died in the process, and all the other gods left. They fled, leaving the people to themselves, and the beacons turned off. So over the years, hundreds of years, the planets have just slowly started to collapse into chaos, droughts, famine. So you have half of the people kind of wanting to light the beacons again, trying to find a way, and then the other half think we should not light them. We have our main characters who in the first book find each other, up to our main characters to figure out how to light the beacons, what's going on, defeat evil, all of that good stuff. This series is written and illustrated by 5 creators. So Mark Siegel, Alexis Siegel, Xanth Bouma, Matt Rockefeller, and Boya Sun. So a lot of really talented and incredible people putting this together. So I highly suggest that book to y'all. But that's all I've been reading, y'all. Like I said, anything else that I've been reading, I will catch y'all up on next month in our July wrap up. As always, guys, thank y'all so much for watching. What have you been reading? Let me know. Do you have any suggestions? Any new horror, thrillers, anything? What do you got for me? You got any suggestions? I'll read anything. Or for Shelby, y'all know, between me and Shelby, we basically read anything and everything. Y'all don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Take care, and we will see you in our next video. Bye!